I've got a very special guest today, my friend Bob Liodice. Bob is CEO and president of the ANA. He's had an amazing, distinguished career running the ANA for about 25 years, I believe.
That's
and
exactly.
some great work, Bob, including wonderful work with transparency in advertising. And maybe we'll just start there for the moment as we welcome you to DPAA Short Connects. Bob, on the transparency issue, you really unearthed issues, you had a plan, and you solved problems. And it's, as I understand and I see, it's actually gone global in terms of advertisers and agencies working better together in more transparent fashion. So can you give us kind of an update on the transparency issues, a little bit where it came from and where it's going?
Sure. It started probably in the 2013-2014 range, when a practice that had essentially been overseas that were related to rebates were essentially started to creep into the US. And that was a practice that had not happened before. And essentially the issue was, if agencies were getting rebates as a result of their media buys, that those rebates should have been turned over to the marketers. Long story short, we found out that they weren't through a very thorough investigation by an outside investigation company called K2, and then expanded broadly through a dialogue that we had through the publications of Ubiquity and some contract work done by Reed Smith. And that was published in 2016. And what that did was while it caused a lot of controversy at the time, it allowed for a more important conversation around transparency as a philosophy, as opposed to just simply focused in on rebates. And what this, from a marketer standpoint, did was it made them pay attention more closely to their media contracts, many of which had not been updated in years, actually media agency contracts. And it allowed for a different conversation to take place to ensure that marketers were getting more and more information that would allow for them to make better decisions, as opposed to the vagaries of whatever you want to call them, walled gardens or programmatic deals that essentially obfuscated a lot of those insights that would optimize the decision making for marketers. So that continued and has mowed it along for quite a bit of time, but probably not to the fullest extent that we would have liked it to have. And even though that the philosophy has expanded overseas, there is still a substantial amount of opaqueness within our total ecosystem that has actually ignited trust issues among the various segments of clients, agencies, and media companies. And so we have continued to do a lot of work in this area, and our essentially brethren in the UK, known as ISBA, just recently issued a study in the past couple of weeks on programmatic transparency that essentially was an end-to-end digital media supply chain study. And in that regard, found again major gaps in the flow of data. And essentially, one of the key findings that we've been talking about for years is that about only half of a marketer's investment actually reaches the publisher, and in turn reaches the consumer. And the rest is kind of lost within the entire digital media supply chain. And it's that concern of where there is just an incredible amount of money that is not being seen, to the degree of at least 15%, which in the United States would equate to about $20 or so billion. That's just kind of lost in space. So it's still on our radar screen. It's still a heavy area of focus. And we've created the Trust Consortium inside the ANA to continue to pursue this. And we will continue to ramp up efforts through the balance of this year and into 21.
Yeah, great, important work. Thanks for your leadership on
Thank you.
that, Bob. So we're now in the age of COVID, and your members are brands, and what are they telling you about their spend? There seems to have been pauses. There's been some cancellations. Looks like markets are opening up. It looks like there's a little bit more activity. What are you hearing now, Bob, in terms of advertising spend going forward?
Now, the immediate reaction back in March, when things started to explode, if you will, was a massive pullback. Why? Because many consumers weren't necessarily interested in selling messages. The world was turned on its head, and as a result, if we believe, and we do believe, that the consumer is the center of our universe, the consumers weren't interested in being sold to. Rather, they had a very, very different need state. The need state focused in on financial concerns and employment concerns, and obviously health concerns. And so was an incredible conversion towards reconfiguring whatever messages were going out there to focus in on consumer empathy, to ensure that the dialogue between brand and consumer was focused in on being useful and purposeful, as opposed to being self-congratulatory and promotion. And that was a massive change, and it required a real rethink in terms of the messaging, which is continuing to evolve now as we're seemingly gaining at least some progress on the COVID battle. And the messaging now needs to transition to a level of normalcy, but with a continued focus in on that relationship building, because brands have this unique ability to connect with consumers, particularly if their messages are authentic and sincere. And that bonding can create that long-term loyalty, which provides the foundation for market share. To that end, media spend has also had to adapt, particularly since many companies were also ravaged by essentially the almost turning off of the economic spigot. And certain industries such as travel and entertainment have been really hurt terribly, and they've gone completely dark, whereas some consumer packaged good companies are doing just fine, thank you very much. So the focus in on where to spend and how much to spend, it really varies company by company. We're starting to see obviously a bounce back in that, which is good to see. It indicates that confidence is growing, that things are returning to normal, and we've seen lots of states open up gradually, in some cases full bore in others. And in that regard, the ability to invest in increasing fashion makes all the sense of the world, particularly in your industry, Barry, as people are now getting out of home. And in that regard, we're seeing that in all forms of media, but particularly yours, which probably had a significant shutdown in the March-April timeframe, we think is bouncing back.
One of the greatest conferences I and everybody in the industry looks forward to every year is the A&A Masters of Marketing in the fall. One of the largest conferences, but also one of the most poignant, demonstrating thought leadership, innovation, and really a great learning experience and great communication and connecting for everybody that attends. What are your plans this year, Bob, given a lot of unknowns?
Right now, we are still planning to hold the Masters, both as a live event and as a virtual event. So we will have this hybrid model, so to speak, because we know that there are going to be people that have travel bans within their respective companies and just can't physically attend. And we would imagine that our speakers will be doing the same. So it will be a blend of both a hybrid conference, it will be a blend of a virtual conference as well as an in-person conference. We have no idea how registrations are going to be, and that's always the big question mark, because so much depends on the ability of any of our registrants to feel comfortable jumping on a plane and staying at a facility that's not their own home. We're hoping that as COVID theoretically diminishes, that confidence will increase and that we'll have at least a fair representation in the audience. The topics are going to still pivot off of what we believe are the fundamental tenets of driving growth, but they will be more focused in on, as Mark Pritchard likes to say, being a force for good while being a force for growth. And we'll probably be bringing more humanity to the stage and talking about what companies have done to build those consumer relationships, and have a greater sensitivity for many of the current day issues that we're facing now within the marketplace of racism, which is, in our society and sustainability plank, where we have a very hard and large focus in on equality and inclusion. And those represent the issues that we have to speak to, and we will. And so it will change to some degree, but we'll be focusing on 4 primary tenets, which are data and technology, society and sustainability, brand and media, and talent and organization. And even though many of our presenters will cover some or all of them in their remarks, we believe that so many of them will be bringing that level of empathy to the stage with an acknowledgement of how their brand strategies and their growth strategies have been shaped by current events that we've all been hit with this year.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I'm glad to see you're addressing it in the Masters of Marketing, Bob. But you've been addressing inclusion and diversity for quite a while now at the AMA, and I understand you've also got a new initiative in addition to all the great work you've been doing already.
And we created an organization called the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, or AIM for short. And this group has been doing some remarkable work. First of all, focusing in on creating a metric that allows for the ability for an advertiser to understand the cultural relevance of their ads, and creating certain metrics that will allow them to be able to improve the cultural relevance and thereby drive greater sales and awareness for their respective consumers. But most recently, we obviously were focused in on bringing to bear our industry and bringing greater degrees of recognition that in the marketplace where racism has unfortunately raised its ugly head in a very profound way, we needed to do something, and we needed to address it. And I won't take you through all of the gory details, so to speak, but what is more importantly is an acknowledgement and a recognition by our board of directors that this is now a time for action to address the issues that we face, because let's face it, we in our industry have issues, and to try to turn a blind eye to it would be foolish and completely unwarranted. So we know that we do not have diverse leadership. We know that we don't necessarily have marketers' strategies which are focused in on multicultural marketing and diversity. In fact, only 5% of marketing is focused in against multicultural, with only 50% or thereabouts of our marketers that have a multicultural marketing strategy. So we have to make a firmer commitment to do that. And there are an array of initiatives that are located on our site, but they're all about action and commitments to do better. We've made some progress over the years, but certainly not enough. We've called attention to things over the years that have had fast ups and fast downs. I think that what has taken place in our entire livelihood, which is now global, which I'm happy to see, is that this is a tipping point for us all, and a wake-up call for us to grab hold of what is the issue, what are the issues, and to not just really give it lip service, but to give it strict attention to what it is that we need to do, both as an industry and in our community affairs, to tackle those types of issues that are holding us back, and that in fact can make a difference in the lives of our consumers, and to be better marketers in that regard. And you see that in an immense array of commitments that the industry is making across the board, with a recognition most recently of the concerns of the Black community. And I'm very proud of our organizations that have taken a stand and have made very significant commitments to address those concerns. And we're very proud of those people to indicate that these are just not one-time events, that this is this now has to be organic to every individual and to every company that's out there. So
you mentioned earlier some thoughts on out of home for our audience. Any more thoughts on the growth of the industry over the past few years and what's coming?
Yeah, I first of all, I'm so thrilled that of the work that you do and the work of your industry. One of the, I'll call it fundamental tenets of what's taken place over the past decade is the reinvention of the media across all forms. And one of the areas that needed an incredible refreshing was the out-of-home arena. And we're absolutely delighted that it has come from where it was, which was just essentially billboards on highways, to being everywhere, whether it's in elevator banks or taxi cabs or bus depots or wherever it may be. And that I think that it has given marketers a greater ability to recognize the power to influence consumers by being everywhere, so to speak. And so I am just thrilled at you used the words before, creativity and innovation that has taken place within your industry to find unique ways to connect with the consumers and to provide vehicles for marketers to strongly consider. And if I'm not mistaken, if I remember some of your growth metrics, it's been up until the point of COVID, very robust, ahead of industry trends, which is a lot to be said in this era where media investments are scrutinized for their productivity and returns. And the growth that you've been able to accumulate is an acknowledgement that people believe in what the media can do, and like everything, they're committing with their dollars. So however they are deciding to allocate those dollars, they obviously have decided that the entire out-of-home industry is a place where that should show up. I'd like
to do a few takeaways when we do this, and as I kind of hear what Bob Liodice is saying, one is very important. The consumer is the center of the universe, you said, and that's what we all have to keep so focused on. Number two, authenticity and sincerity is key. And knowing you for all these years, you typified that, and the more brands can typify that, the more they will succeed, especially in these days and going forward. And then third, very importantly, the A&A Masters of Marketing is on this year. Maybe some virtual, maybe some in person, but either way, it'll be one of the great leadership conferences of the year. So those are my three takeaways from Bob Liodice. And before we go, it's a challenging time. You're working at home. I know you've got a great family, but what inspires you during this time to kind of, stay at home in a secluded setting? How do you kind of draw inspiration from your daily work and life?
I am inspired by, and I'm sure you're seeing it as well, Barry, is that when pressed to continue the work that we do, we've had to reinvent ourselves. And that reinvention has come organically from our people. I cannot tell you how many reinventions that people have done, from the smallest of details to the most significant of decisions that need to be made. And I'm overwhelmed and gratified that people and talent can influence our lives in so many different ways. And that brings it back to something which I've been on the bandwagon for many years, and that is about talent and organization. It's inspiring to know that people can make a difference, and they should know how importantly they can make a difference. But as employers, it's paramount that people should be at our center of the most important assets that we have to facilitate change and innovation. And it's incumbent upon us to ensure that our talent is properly trained and properly resourced in order to optimize their delivery. So even though that we are all apart, fortunately technology has brought us all together. And to that end, they are my inspiration.
That's excellent. Bob, it is always a pleasure. One of the true greats, Bob Liodice. Thank you for joining our session of DPAA Short Connects today. And we'll talk to you and hopefully see you in person soon. And,
that would be
and
great.
Maybe we could even get back to hugs at some time.
That would be good. It's been a lot of fun, Barry. You and your team are always fantastic. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to chat with everyone.
Of course. Thank you so much, Bob. Excellent.